Have you ever seen a Chaos Demon? They're all slime and antlers. They're disgusting.
Today the faction focus is on Chaos Demons. I'll be honest, I have some praise and some salt, which I promise is totally, not at all completely devoid of my bias towards She Who Thirsts. Let's take a look. Before we get into the spotlights themselves, we have some text confirming all demon units will have invulnerable saves. Hooray! I for one am so excited. Honestly, I doubted GW would do anything too mold-breaking when it comes to demons and invulnerable saves. And while it's not what I would like to see, it's certainly better than 9th's lame demonic saves. First up, we get the army rule for Chaos Demons, the Shadow of Chaos. Spoilers, it's loads better than the Warp Storm dice system, which is admittedly a shitty mechanic from a design point of view. Shadows of Chaos is an ability which creates Shadow of Chaos zones on the battlefield which favor your units and harm the enemies. It works thusly. Your deployment zone is always in shadows. If you control at least half the objectives in No Man's Land is in shadows. And the same is true for the enemy deployment zone. If you control at least half of those objectives, the Shadows of Chaos fills their deployment zone. With the zone definitions clarified, this affects two sub-abilities. Demonic Manifestation, which grants your units within shadows a +1 to battle shock tests, and if the test is passed, they regain D3 lost wounds, which also notes that battle line units just regain D3 lost models. This speaks to the Dark Invigoration perk from 9th edition's Warpstorm table. Demonic Terror is the inverse. Enemy units within shadows subtract 1 from their battle shock tests, and if the test is failed, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. Like I said, it's certainly better than the Warpstorm table of 9th edition. It's just not exactly what I would have liked to see. Next we have the Demons Detachment and Detachment rule. It seems the index detachment for demons is called Demonic Incursion, and grants your units the Warp Rifts rule. Warp Rifts allow you to set up units from deep strike 6 inches away from enemy units instead of 9 inches, if your unit is wholly within a Shadows of Chaos zone. This is certainly a strong ability, one that speaks to the manifestation rules in 9th edition. But instead of using your demonic loci units, it uses zones created by the new Shadow of Chaos army rule. Though keep in mind, Shadows zones are affected at the start of a phase, meaning you can't extend your Shadows of Chaos territory in the movement phase and then deep strike in, assuming deep strike is still after the movement step but in the movement phase. Between their army and detachment rules, demons will seem to have an improved gameplay mechanic to play to, but one that keeps the spirit of what I feel were the most valuable tools from the Warpstorm table, which is good. But there is something I dislike about this combination. That is, for this index period, there's no design space here indicated for individual demonic allegiances. There is nothing here to reward me for playing a pure Slaanesh Demon's army, which sucks. I quite like the sheer flavor of the rules the demonic allegiances have in Age of Sigmar, and I hope GW doesn't want to just turn 40k's Chaos Demons into Be'lakor the King of Demons. Before moving on, we have one last army rule for Chaos Demons. Demonic Pact is effectively rules for allying Chaos Demons with Chaos Space Marines. The most noteworthy thing here is the wording at the bottom around Lucius the Eternal rather than Emperor's Children, which effectively confirms two things. 1. An Emperor's Children codex and range will be far out enough into 10th, if at all, that this distinction during the index period is warranted. And 2. You can't officially play Emperor's Children. That technically, you don't play Emperor's Children, you play Chaos Space Marines led by Lucius the Eternal. I'll be praying to She Who Thirsts that at the very least when codices start releasing, they provide detachments to the subfactions we have built our armies to. Even if any paint scheme can use any detachment, which I detest. I'll take some representation rather than none. And you know, speaking personally, that concession really speaks to the desperation I have for having my hobby efforts be rewarded and acknowledged by the tabletop. It seems more and more likely that my script on this topic will become a video, but I digress. When it comes to unit spotlights, we annoyingly don't have any basic troops here. Instead we got two monsters. The Keeper of Secrets is first. Toughness and wounds have increased with the toughness inflation, and weapon profiles are also in line with the AP deflation, so no big deal there. Though the lack of the Witstealer's Sword's debuffing ability is certainly a loss. Moving on to the more interesting elements, first we have the fixed Psychic Witchfire power for the Keeper in Phantasmagoria, boosting the Keeper's lethality against anti-infantry. The Keeper's Aura ability, Demon Lord of Slaanesh, boosts the AP of units within 6 inches, which is a huge boon, One, I presume, boosts its own attacks as it does have the keyword. Continuing on, the Keeper has kept its -1 to hit ability Mesmerizing Form, and Shining Aegis is now a strong 5-up Feel No Pain, which pairs well with its consistent invuln of 4+. What is strange to me is there is no Sinistrous hand representation at all. I quite liked the hand option as it gave the Keeper a bit more sustain, so not seeing it accounted for feels kind of bad. I don't need it to regen health or be game breaking. I only feel it would be a good thing to account for the options players have chosen to build. Overall, the Keeper seems like a good unit, fast and dynamic. But I have a huge issue with what I see here. The Keeper's melee output has remained at strength 8. It hasn't been raised to keep up with the toughness inflation of 10th, as we've seen with many other weapons. And while it's all well and good that the Keeper seems to be an excellent anti-elite infantry tool, what is discouraging is pure Slaanesh seems to have a very low strength ceiling, even lower than it was in 9th edition. Here's hoping there are some other synergies or tools for Slaanesh to compensate for this, such as easy access to lethal hits. Then we get a datasheet for Be'lakor. As the epic hero of the faction, he has the deadly combat output we would expect. And we can see Be'lakor's fixed psychic power is also a Witchfire one. Ability-wise, Be'lakor has several auras. The Dark Master, where any area within 6 inches of him counts as your Shadows of Chaos. This is huge utility, effectively allowing Be'lakor to operate as if he has a demonic loci from 9th edition, when using the demonic incursion detachment rules. One can only hope the named greater demons possess similar utility. Be'lakor's second ability is Shadow Form. Like with Guilliman and Abaddon, it's a choose one of the following abilities for the round, all of which are psychic auras. Wreathed in Shadows prevents units within 6 inches of Be'lakor from being shot unless the attacker is within 18 inches. The second ability, Pall of Despair, can force battle shock tests to enemy units within 6 inches, including enemy units comprised of one model. And the third ability allows you to reroll battle shock and leadership tests to units within 6 inches, which has big interplay with the army rule Shadows of Chaos. The big difference is that Be'lakor chooses at the start of the battle round instead of the command phase, which does impact using defensive abilities on turn 1. I'll try to keep my bias in check. I think Be'lakor looks incredibly good. He's got strong interplay with the army rules, and the value of his auras will be immense, to the point where he may be an auto-include in most demon armies. I don't like having these auto-include big cheese units that you're a fool for not taking, as it seems you get unprecedented force multiplied value by castling up and around them. And in that comparison, for me, he's like Abaddon but worse, because Be'lakor doesn't even have Booba. Next we got Weapon Spotlights, where Warhammer Community uses a Great Unclean One to show the universal weapon ability Extra Attacks, allowing that weapon to be used in addition to the one selected to attack with, which is a soft confirmation on how melee attack allocation will work. As for the Bileblade itself, it seems alright. Lethal hits is a nice representation of poison, but here's hoping a future Nurgle detachment gets far more creative with it. Next is Skarbrand's weapons, which seem absolutely immense. The sweep is made moderate by comparison, but I still think it's quite good. But what are absolutely immense are the 8 attacks at strength 16, AP 4 dealing 6 damage flat. It is certainly the heavy hitter weapon preview here on display. And we got the demonic incursion detachment stratagem, Corrupt Real Space, which gives an objective marker you control with a Legion's Demonica unit in your command phase sticky objective control. And it also allows it to provide a Shadows of Chaos zone within 6 inches of it, which certainly offers some utility depending on how objectives are placed in a given mission. It's a good stratagem which ties into the toolkit of the army. Good pick for the preview, Warhammer Community. Well, that wraps up this Daemons Faction Focus preview. Overall, I'd say it's a strong one. We got army and detachment rules in the spotlight, with Be'lakor and the stratagem showing some toolkit interplay. Though it does lose some points, as not offering any bonuses for a pure demonic allegiance is mondo lame. So I'd give this one a 6 out of 10. But I want to hear from you, and especially the Demons players out there. What do you think of this Faction Focus preview?